On behalf of SIFX Treasury Foundation, I welcome all of you to this webinar on LIBOR transition. As all of you are aware, SIFX Treasury Foundation is an educational initiative by a group of former syndicate bank dealers with the sole objective of giving back to the society. Such an initiative has no parallels in anywhere in the world. A set of people who were spotted and nurtured and then trained by a PSU bank management 30 years back, coming together to form a foundation to pass on the knowledge to the markets. This speaks volumes about the emotional and intellectual relationship between the mentor and mentees. The quality of training programs conducted by a PSU bank anywhere in the world, even within the limited resources 30 years back, and the kind of talent and the human resources potential that exists even today in PSU banks. SIFX Treasury Foundation, since its inauguration, has conducted a number of webinars on topical importance, and we have also conducted a number of training programs for the benefit of treasury professionals across the banking industry. Today, we are set to discuss a topic on LIBOR transition. Just like Y2K we had at the beginning of the century, and Brexit we had in 2016, 5 years back, LIBOR transition is another topic which has significant for the financial services industry. Risk around the LIBOR transition comes in the form of operational, legal, and technical challenges. So LIBOR transition requires a lot of preparation. Unfortunately, the preparation levels for LIBOR transition is something not up to the expectation. Actually, even today, there has been a report that says only 40% of the corporates are prepared for LIBOR transition or preparing for the LIBOR transition. So we are going to have a webinar on LIBOR transition where Indian thought leadership on LIBOR transition is going to debate on the subject. So by 6 o'clock, we will have more clarity on LIBOR transition than we have at 4:30. So I request Mr. Ravi Varanasi to welcome the gathering with his opening remarks. Over to Ravi Varanasi.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Tyagarajan, Mr. Simphani, Mr. Kar, Mr. Bhagat, Mr. Ansaria, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, everybody. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar on LIBOR transition. As Mr. Tyagarajan has mentioned, this is a once in a lifetime kind of a scenario after Y2K and some of the other major transitions. We are really looking at a significant transition for the financial market participants. We at NSE are happy to be associated with the SIFX Treasury Foundation and bringing this discussion of immense topical importance to all of you. Interbank offered rates, particularly LIBOR, have been serving as widely accepted benchmark interest rates. And therefore, the forthcoming transition is going to be one of the most significant changes for the financial services industry. The unparalleled scale of this industry-wide transition presents considerable challenges, including potential financial, legal, operational, conduct, and reputational risks. By one estimate, value of LIBOR referenced financial instruments stand at almost $200 trillion. As the global financial industry prepares for the transition away from LIBOR, the new benchmarks need to be found, and the industry has to really figure out what are the alternatives, concerns and implementation, and impact on business. All these things are coming to the fore. Industry participants have been developing transition strategies, as Mr. Tyagarajan has mentioned earlier. Idea is to adopt the alternative benchmarks. So far, LIBOR has been an all-pervasive benchmark. So if you have a loan, chances are that it is somehow linked to LIBOR. Similarly, investments you hold may have LIBOR as a benchmark. The imminent retirement of LIBOR has forced financial institutions to conduct an end-to-end inventory of their exposure. This would cover the full range of processes, models, and systems, including pricing, valuation, risk management, and booking. This process could reveal a number of challenges for the financial markets participants, with many having to rethink their operations, technology infrastructure, and adapting new technologies to help with the transition. One of the major concerns is around converting tough legacy positions to the new benchmarks. This will be an ongoing process throughout this migration and has to be completed by the deadline. Another component is to increase the contractual robustness. A major concern in handling transition is in finding appropriate fallback provisions set forth in the legal contracts. The third major concern is related to the market risks inherent in restructuring a fully hedged financial contract. It's a nightmare. I'm sure most of you would be really spending sleepless nights in trying to figure out how exactly you're going to achieve this. And the other major concern is which rates will replace the LIBOR, and how these base rates compare, and whether such rates have appropriate liquidity, term structure, etc. No doubt the impact of this transition will be far-reaching for the corporates, banks, financial institutions. I'm happy that today's webinar would delve deep into some of these concerns and point efficient pathways to handle the transition so as to ensure that all of us are on the other side when the transition gets completed. Experts in the field are here to share their views, opinions with us. I don't want to really stand between you and the experts. I once again extend warm welcome to all of you and wish this webinar all the very best. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Ravi. Our first speaker for the evening is Mr. Ashwani Sindwani. With the close to 4 decades of experience, he is currently charting the roadmap for LIBOR transition for Indian markets. Started with the State Bank of India in 1983, he had a distinguished career subsequently with the BNP Paribas for almost 21 years, where he rose to become the managing director. He was then synonymous with the treasury sales in the markets and was a highly successful treasury professional. He became chief executive of FEDI in 2016, and he was playing a pivotal role through the last 5 years in developing processes and products in coordination with the Reserve Bank of India. He shall be introducing the subject and explaining the initiatives that have been taken for the transition. Over to Mr. Ashwani.
Thanks, Venki. Thanks a lot for that introduction. If you had not spoken the name, I was wondering whom are you referring to, basically. Thanks a lot. At the outset, I would like to convey my appreciation, regards, and also thanks to SYFX Treasury Foundation for doing what all you people are doing in the market. What a novel thought, as Tyagu mentioned, about paying back something to the market, paying back something to the society. And I must say that though every time I talk to Tyagu will tell me we have done this. Let me tell you, I have been following up. I have been attending most of your programs and the things without you even knowing it. So it's really a good work you people are doing, and something which was required in the market. And I know that a little more is required. A lot more needs to be done in the domestic Indian financial market. But yes, it's a step in the right direction. And thanks a lot for that. And thanks to NSE also for joining hands for this important topic, important initiative which you people have taken. And at the outset, as Venki mentioned, that I have to introduce the topic. I think we people, I don't think anybody would have started the career when LIBOR was not there. This is something which started in 1969. If I may just share with you something, where is it coming from? And any of us, as Mr. Ravi Varanasi also mentioned, that dollar interest rates or global interest rates have been synonymous with LIBOR. Anything to do with, you want to borrow in the overseas global market, you want to lend, you want to invest, you have got any other interest rate, risk management, everything, the only reference rate, only benchmark we all had come across was LIBOR. And this is something which originally started with the three currencies, namely dollar, yen, and pound sterling. And at one point of time, the scope had expanded to 10 currencies, and they were coming out announcing every day 15 maturities ranging from overnight to 1 year. So you can imagine 150 daily LIBORs being announced, though currently they had cut it down to 7 maturities for 5 currencies. So practically even today, there are 35 rates being announced every day. And as Mr. Varanasi mentioned, that a total of something, an estimated 200 trillion of financial contracts are referencing USD LIBOR as of today. And just if I look at the other side, what is the size of the market based on which this rate is decided? As against 200 million trillion and 200 trillion of financial contracts, the daily funding transactions which happen reference to 3-month USD LIBOR is something in the range of only $500 million. So we can just compare these two, 500 million versus 200 trillion. So we are clearly looking at a kind of reverse pyramid structure. 200 trillion worth of transactions are being priced, mark to market, structured, dealt with based on the underlying market, which has got a volume of just 500 million. I say it clearly, a recipe for misuse, manipulation, and that's exactly what happened. And that's the reason why the discussion started, that we need to find an alternate, we need to move away. And finally, in 2017, when Financial Conduct Authority announced that they'll be stopping the continuation or declaration or calculation of LIBOR effective 2021, end of 2021, that was the beginning of this. But surprisingly, I should say that till very recently or even today, people are little bit looks like relaxed or taking it easy. Let me just reiterate that this is something event, as Thiago also mentioned, in the same league as maybe the Y2K, Brexit, and maybe it is a much bigger event for the financial market, and it is going to impact all of us, all the market players, be it on the sell side, on the buy side, or even people maybe who are not directly involved in this, but have got anything to do with the global market. It is going to have a bearing, and we can't escape this. There is no way but to be prepared, get our house in order, take care of it, allocate adequate resources, have a proper structured plan to address the issues. And issues are not just one unidirectional. Issues are multifaceted. The only good thing I'll say which has happened based on the announcement which was done by FCA on 5th March, which was practically accepted as an trigger event for the cessation of LIBOR, is that ICE, the LIBOR's administrator, ICE Benchmark Administration, they have announced that they'll continue publishing LIBOR for overnight 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and 12 month setting till 30th June 2023. So practically they have given a little reprieve to the market, additional 18 months to the market to take care of the legacy contracts. Legacy contracts, what I'm repeating, I'm emphasizing on this, legacy contracts, existing contracts. This window should not be confused with the thing that you can continue dealing in new contracts of LIBOR even beyond Jan 2022. No, most of the central banks, most of the authorities have made it very clear that no new LIBOR related contracts should happen beyond a cutoff date. For your information, UK had announced a cutoff date the end of first quarter. It has already passed. US has announced that no new contracts beyond 1st Jan 2022 in US dollar LIBOR. So let's be clear that additional time which has been given to us, which we have got, has increased the comfort, has eased the participants' worry, but this should not be a reason for the market participants to get complacent. This is not and should not be treated as a simple administrative change in the benchmark rates. The exercise of discontinuation of IBOR rates, transition of legacy IBOR contracts to new reference rates, selection of appropriate alternates to the IBOR model, system changes, new product development. There's a hell of a lot of work which needs to be done by all the market participants, a little bit more by the banks who are basically on the sell side of the market. we are moving from a standardized mechanism to multiple variants of alternate reference rates and different market conventions. Just to elaborate it further, let me clarify. Earlier, there was one single administrator who was announcing the LIBOR rates for 5 currencies. Now, for each currency, there is going to be a separate administrator. There will be a separate mechanism. There will be a separate timing for the announcement. There will be a different market convention. So it's going to be a much more complex thing than what it is right now. And if you are not prepared for it, there is going to be, this is bound to be a recipe for problems, disasters, and difficulties for all of us. And I don't think any of us is prepared for any market disruption in this time when we are already facing a big disruption because of other issues which are beyond our control. And that is the reason which I would like to highlight, because we are already having our resources are already stressed because of ongoing COVID epidemic. This is the reason why we need to prepare in advance. We need to be very clear to be able to allocate, besides earmark, allocate resources for this exercise, which is a complex matter involving not only legal, accounting, hedging, conduct, litigation, and reputation risks. Surprisingly, as Thiago also mentioned in his opening remarks, there seems to be widespread incredulity, disbelief about the repercussions of the LIBOR phase out among both banks and corporates alike, which has led to a kind of sense of complacence. And the risks for firms range from operational risk to operational risk to reputational risk, and the lack of market readiness could have a substantial impact on the profitability and also to the access to the global market liquidity. For the banks, the customer sensitization and addressing of legal, taxation, accounting issues is crucial. Orderly transition from LIBOR and the adoption of alternate reference rates should continue to be a priority to ensure financial system stability, involving the collective efforts of regulators and all the market participants. It is very important for us to understand the key differences between the existing LIBOR and the new reference rates, new alternate rates. The one most important difference which coming out to be LIBOR, which we have all got used to, is a combination of interbank rates comprising of credit risk, term risk, and the liquidity premium. As against the new reference rates, if I talk about SOFR or any other reference rates also, is only an overnight benchmark rate. It doesn't have a term structure as of now. It doesn't involve any credit risk component. So we are talking about two different references altogether. And both these aspects present significant challenges. Due to these limitations, we are moving from a forward-looking rate, term rate, to a backward-looking discounting rate. That itself is going to change a way, lot many things, the way we operate, the way we structure, the way our systems are operated, the way we manage our cash flows, the way we manage our credit risk, counterparty risk, etc. And also, if I look at many of our products like trade finance and others, where we go for the upfront discounting, this new product, new SOFR may not fit that bill, may not fit that criteria. And that's the reason market is already trying to develop many or some other new product which has got the risk element and probably also the term element, term premium as well into it. Where market has already seen similar rates named like Ameribor, Bloomberg short-term bank yield rate, ICE bank yield index, which have emerged. Though it is still too early to say which one is going to be adopted by the market. So in short, we are talking about moving away from LIBOR, and we may not be having just single alternate rate which will fit all the requirements of LIBOR. We may have to go for multiple rates depending upon our requirement, whether it is for the risk management, whether it is for the financing requirement, whether it is for management of ALM. Depending upon the underlying requirement, we may have to go for more than one reference rates going forward. Are we ready for this? Are we prepared for this? That's the major key point. Second one comes about whenever we talk about LIBOR and other things or switchover, first thing comes to our mind is the derivative products. That I think is the easier one to handle, because over there, the bodies like ISDA, they have already come out with standard protocols Once you sign that protocol, your counterparty has signed that protocol, everything automatically falls in place. Whereas if you look at the cash products, which are bilateral, your ECBs, your FCCBs, these are the bilateral. There are no standard market protocols for that. We all need to discuss, negotiate, realign all those contracts individually, bilaterally, one by one with all our counterparty. I don't know how much time it's going to take. That can be a very lengthy process. And banks' internal model need to be redesigned for appropriate risk factors, time series for the new risk-free rate curves. And if you add on to it the cross-currency swaps, imagine somebody having a dollar sterling cross-currency swap. You're talking about two series, two floating LIBORs, which are going to be transitioned into two new reference rates, each one with different market convention, different things. So my idea of narrating all this is just to emphasize that don't take it lightly. This is not a simple switchover. This exercise has got many connotations, many angles, many aspects which are going to be impacted because of this. So we as market players need to be watchful, need to be careful. I'm sure we have got a line of and equally capable people over there who have been addressing this, Mr. Bhagat, Mr. Kar, who have been involved in this exercise. They'll be taking you through the various aspects, how at the industry level, we are trying to take care of these aspects. So my idea is only to re-emphasize once again that take it seriously, be careful about it, what we are getting. We have already seen the experience in the name of second wave of COVID. We can't take the things easy. We have to be prepared. This is something which is going to hit us by the end of this year. We need to be in the state of readiness. That's all. Thanks a lot. Thank you once again.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashwini, for the lucid explanation. In fact, you have set the ball on the roll now. Our next speaker is Mr. Rudra Kar, a banking and financial expert with 30 years of experience in the Reserve Bank of India. Extensive experience in policy making in the field of regulation and supervision of financial markets, institutions, and instruments, especially in foreign exchange markets, government securities market, debt market, and also portfolio management. Currently, as a Chief Executive Officer of Financial Benchmarks India Private Limited, he is responsible for developing and administering the various financial benchmarks in the area of money market, government securities, foreign exchange, and derivatives. He is the man who is in charge of steering the country through a LIBOR transition process. He will be sharing with us the Indian perspective of LIBOR transition. Over to you, Mr. Arankar.
Yeah, Ravi, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Tyagarajan, for inviting me to your CFI Foundation. So it's a great privilege to be here and to share the work that we have done in the past couple of months. Yeah, it has been, as Ashwin has put it, it's a challenging road ahead. And the task is really very difficult. The complexities are so much. We have been working for quite some time. And of course the end is visible, and then I'll give a progress report of what we have been doing to tackle the LIBOR transition roadmap in India. As you know, there are two segments at the financial market where LIBOR is a reference rate. Either it is the loans or the debt or the cash component, and the derivatives market. While as Ashwin says, some amount of work has been done in the international arena. There have been ARRs, what we call it, the alternate reference rate. The compelling circumstance is that FCA has finally come out with an announcement that the LIBOR settings are going to go. And they have determined that there is a suggestion event. And the timeline has been set. Of course, for the USD LIBOR, the settings of the LIBOR settings can continue, except the 2 months and 1 week. It can continue up to 30th June 2023. But that doesn't imply that we have time up to June 30, 2023 to migrate. No, we have to migrate today and today only. So what we have done, of course, in this regard, IBA has taken the lead. It has set up the work stream well in time, and the work stream has created few working groups again. One group looking at the reference rates, one group looking at the fallback arrangement languages, one group looking at the reach out, outreach programs, which Mr. Bhagat will definitely elaborate in more details. I need not get into this. What we have done, that the working group has determined or has looked into two aspects of the MIFOR basically. While the loan and loan products, they are of course equally important and they are more important, they have to be addressed. There are certain regulatory guidelines which RBI needs to address. As of now, there is no constraining provision in the RBI regulation to carry on the task. While you need not refer to LIBOR, but there are provisions in the RBI guideline, both in the ECB or the credit guidelines. There are enough leeways where the market can still continue till a new guideline or new framework comes from RBI. It is more about technicalities. What should substitute LIBOR, what should substitute spread, what should the spread. If a reference rate substitutes LIBOR and that reference rate is a risk-free reference rate, then what happens to the spread between LIBOR and the risk-free rate? How that spread gets adjusted? So all those kind of technical things RBI needs to address. But otherwise, currently, the way the regulation is designed, the regulation doesn't prohibit you from entering into a ECB using the swap route or using the swap rates as a reference rate. That flexibility is built into all the RBI circulars. So obviously, but I presume RBI is independently working to address these regulatory issues. The other issue, which is basically is a little complex, is basically how do we handle MIFOR? MIFOR, we have been, as all of you know, MIFOR has been in India for quite some time, but in April 2018, the administrator, ABL became the administrator of MIFOR. Prior to it, it was basically FIMDA Refinitiv, it's more of a co-branded product, and it was a poll-based submission. In April 2018, FBIL started publishing the MIFOR for 7 tenors, and it was a derived product, partly derived from the USD INR swap premium, which are based on actual transactions, and the LIBOR, USD LIBOR produced by ICE. So it was a composite rate or a synthetic rate, and it was, as you said, it was derived from the transactions level data as far as USD INR leg is concerned. As regards the LIBOR leg, Ashwin has already clarified that he has for $2 trillion worth of transactions, $500 transactions become the reference from where the judgment is derived and a quote is made. Yeah, that was basically the reality, but whatever. But then that was the only liquid reference rate available at that point of time. So MIFOR was built based on the USD LIBOR and the USD INR product. Now that the LIBOR is going and that there is a suggestion notice and the rate has been determined, and FCA has come out very clearly saying that this LIBOR has to go. Obviously, we have been working to replace it. Now we need to address the two things. One is basically what happens to the legacy transactions, the transactions that are sitting in the books of the banks and corporates, and what happens to the new rate, and when that new rate comes into play. As regards the legacy contract, obviously the IBA work group has taken the lead. They have looked at various combinations, various products which are available in the market. Both they have looked at the possibility of using the LIBOR substitute, the USD SOFR, and also the possibility of looking at domestic rates like MIBOR or market repo overnight rate, or looking at T-bill rates, whether those can be also considered as alternative reference rate for substituting MIFOR. At the end of it, based on a market survey, the IBA has recommended to us that the legacy transactions can be referred to a concept called adjusted MIFOR. And this adjusted MIFOR will be synthetically derived from the USD INR forward premium rate and also the USD SOFR, which is an overnight rate. Obviously, as Ashwin has already highlighted, the SOFR is an overnight rate, one. And second, if you have to build on the SOFR for using for developing the rates for all the tenors, then obviously I have to go backward and I have to depend on the compounding concept. Hence, the entire SOFR compounded in arrear, which is used for the adjusted MIFOR, will be a rate in arrear, while the USD INR forward premium is a forward-looking rate. Yes, we know it as the rate record date. Hence, a concept of rate record date has been devised by the ISDA in the ISDA rule book. All the rates would be tagged to the rate record date, and they will be compounded in arrears. So the adjusted MIFOR will be produced using the adjusted SOFR compound in arrear plus a spread, because as you know, SOFR is a risk-free rate. And of course, if you look at the difference between LIBOR and a 3-month LIBOR and 3-month SOFR, it could be the spread could be as high as 30 basis point to 60, 70 basis point. That it has been. So obviously, we have to equate we have to at least bring the rate nearer to the LIBOR rate. To do that, a spread is required. And that spread adjustment is being now the spread adjustment and the adjusted SOFR compounded in arrear is being published by Bloomberg Index Services Limited on a regular basis. ISDA has tasked BISL to produce both the adjusted SOFR compound in arrear and also the spread adjustment on a regular basis. Using these data points, both the spread as well as the adjusted SOFR compound in arrear, which is called the all-in fallback rate, we will be able to calculate the adjusted MIFOR for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months, and including overnight. So as of now, our plan is that they to go live with the adjusted MIFOR, which would replace the MIFOR for all the legacy transactions, and market may switch over to market has multiple options. As of now, since the LIBOR is not ceasing on 31st December 2021, the USD LIBOR has a life up to June 30, 2023. The market has a menu of choices. The market can use the adjusted SOFR to transit the existing contract. They can use the MIFOR to liquidate the contract before its expiry, or they can transit to a new reference rate, which is called modified MIFOR. So I'll talk a little bit about that also. So now the market has a menu of choice and a time from today till 2023 June to migrate or to close down or wind down the contract within this period. But this time is let's understand, this time is not a great time. It's not a very long time which the market has got. Market has got a breather only to set up their infrastructure, only to understand the product, only to sign the fallback arrangement, create the fallback language. It takes a lot of time, and specifically when the banks try to contact and reach each and every of its customer who have used the MIFOR or who have used LIBOR as one of the reference rate. Obviously, it's a gigantic task on the part of the banks, and the time is not too long for that purpose. So then obviously now the issue is about how do you handle the new transactions. We would presume and we would believe and we would expect that after December 31, 2021, the market should move away from referencing to MIFOR any longer. They should switch over to a new reference rate, which we will also be publishing side by side. That new reference rate would be known as modified MIFOR. And this modified MIFOR is similar to the, in construct, it is similar to the adjusted MIFOR, except that adjusted MIFOR has a spread component, modified MIFOR doesn't have. So what is modified MIFOR? Modified MIFOR is basically a combination, or is synthetically derived by combining the USD INR swap premium of various tenors and the SOFR compounded, USD SOFR compounded in arrears. And it will be again tagged to the rate record date, and it would be a rate in arrears. Now, what is the difficulty? Why FBIL could not switch over to a forward-looking term rate, since our USD INR forward premium is a forward-looking rate and LIBOR is a forward-looking rate? The difficulty is that as of now, there have been transactions some term transactions both in SOFR as well as in SONIA. And in other markets, like even in Japan or in East, the market is developing. There is not enough liquidity in the term market. If you all recall, the Chicago Exchange, CME, is running a futures contract on SOFR. Similar kind of transactions are taking place in the marketplace. The numbers are rising, but the numbers have not reached the place where they can claim that there is enough abundant liquidity, and a term curve created out of these transactions would represent market liquidity. We have not reached that stage. Since the world has not reached the stage, or SOFR has not reached the stage, the respective regulatory authorities are still insisting that the market should depend on the SOFR, which is a predominantly overnight rate, but a robust rate. It's an overnight rate, but a robust rate. And market should transit to this overnight rate till a term curve is available. So since we are dependent on the USD SOFR, or earlier LIBOR, USD LIBOR, and now USD SOFR, obviously we need to find a substitute. There is no other substitute at this point of time than the SOFR overnight rate. As and when SOFR term curve develops, we may revisit. But at this point of time, it's a fait accompli. Only choice or only option could have been to transit to a domestic IBOR, to a domestic or interbank offered rate, like what Singapore has done in our close proximity. What Singapore has done for the new transactions, they moved to what is called Singapore Overnight Rate Average, SORA. Similarly, in Thailand also, they have also moved to the THB fix to a reference rate called Thai Overnight Rate, TOR, whatever. These are the markets where they have been able to do it because they have actually a currency basis market existing. Whereas in case of India, as of now, we do not have a correct linkage or proper linkage between the USD interest rate and the INR interest rate. The currency basis market is yet to develop. Since there is no currency basis market, it becomes very difficult to promoting a domestic IBOR immediately, not accompanied by a currency basis market. It is a long-term goal or maybe a medium-term goal. The market may work towards moving eventually to a IBOR, while simultaneously developing a currency basis market. So that we also say that India has a benchmark, which is basically a domestic benchmark, and my dependence on a synthetically created product like adjusted MIFOR, modified MIFOR goes away. But it is a long-term project and a long-term solution not seen in the immediate horizon. In the immediate horizon for the next couple of years, yes, obviously the way forward is basically using the USD SOFR overnight SOFR compounded arrear and the USD INR forward premium, constructing a modified MIFOR as the alternate reference rate to be used in new transactions, maybe after 31st December 2021. Some kind of mandating is required. So possibly the regulator may be looking at it to mandate that no new transactions should be referred to the MIFOR after December 31, 2021. But we have been discussing in the marketplace certain kind of transactions. It looks like they need to continue referring to MIFOR because they would be required to either reduce your existing exposure to the MIFOR. So since that helps reducing your exposure to MIFOR, they need to be possibly referred to the MIFOR. Otherwise, any new transaction, any new swap transaction or underlying case transaction, loan transactions need to be in a new reference rate. And specifically, the derivative transactions should be referenced to the modified MIFOR from after 31st December 2021. And coming back to where we have progressed, as far as adjusted MIFOR is concerned, the methodology document has been approved by RBI. It has been placed in public domain. Now we have also obtained the approval of RBI for the new reference rate, which is called the modified MIFOR. And we are working on the design of the methodology, and it is well in advance. The application development work is going on. And as I have committed to IBA and also to the government and RBI, we propose to roll out the adjusted MIFOR by 15th June 2021 and the modified MIFOR by 30th June 2021. In the interregnum, we are working at the final display template, both for the adjusted MIFOR and the modified MIFOR. And as soon as the display template is ready, we'll put out the display template in the public domain so that the banks and the customers and the vendors can look at what is the display template, and they can calibrate their internal infrastructure to be able to download the data and use it on a live basis. In addition, we are in dialogue with the IBA as well as ISDA to make modifications to the ISDA protocols as far as the legacy transaction is concerned, replacing MIFOR with adjusted MIFOR for all legacy transactions, and then also changing the ISDA definition. Please remember that the 2006 ISDA definition had a reference to MIFOR. It had reference to MIBOR-OIS compound. It had reference to MIOS. It had also reference to MIFOR. It still has reference. Now that MIFOR, there will be a suggestion plan, we need to change the definition of, we need to incorporate new definitions in the ISDA document, both for the adjusted MIFOR as well as for the modified MIFOR. And in the interregnum, one more step we would like to do while we are simultaneously working on publishing the reference rates, liaising with ISDA to change the definitions and protocols. We are also in dialogue with the RBI to bring out a market consultation on suggestion. We have to give a proper suggestion notice to the marketplace to cease publication of the MIFOR of various tenors of overnight, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. As of now, the understanding is that we would continue to publish MIFOR till June 30, 2023, and we will announce the suggestion of MIFOR, which will be effective from June 30, 2023. But for that purpose, we need to run a consultation program with the market participants and also other stakeholders. That we will carry out. We have some more time with us. In the next month or two, we will attempt to carry out the consultation program also. So that will basically make the work complete, so that the market seamlessly transits to the adjusted MIFOR for all its legacy transactions, and also transits to modified MIFOR for its alternate reference rate. So this is the work that we have done, and a lot of work we have been actively supported by the IBA work stream. Or rather, I would say they are the main focus, and they are the main spirit and the main guide behind the entire transition. We have only designed, we have done only the technical changes in the methodology document, keeping in view the recommendations of the IBA work team. So this is about the transition. The challenges, I think Mr. Sindhwani has already said, and my next speaker, Mr. Gopal Bhagat, will highlight. I will stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Arankar, for that wonderful speech and more detailed information. In fact, we could grasp the Indian perspective of LIBOR transition. Our next speaker is Mr. Gopal Murali Bhagat. Mr. Gopal Murali Bhagat has more than 33 years of rich banking experience. He started his banking career with Bank of India. In addition to the general banking, he also worked in treasury of the bank at domestic as well as overseas centers. He was elevated to the post of executive director in Corporation Bank in 2016. He is currently associated with the LIBOR Transition Initiative from IBA. He will be sharing with us his thoughts on operationalizing the LIBOR transition. Over to Mr. Bhagat.
Thank you, Venki, and thanks to the foundation for inviting me to participate in this webinar. As you have said, and as my predecessors have also mentioned, we really do not have the luxury of taking this event as easy event. It's an event which needs to be looked at very seriously, and organizations, firms, corporates should take care of it from the beginning itself. As Mr. Kar said, we have some time left for the cessation of LIBOR. Some of the LIBORs, will be available up to 30th of June 23. But to my mind, we should appreciate the fact that the transition is already a fact. LIBOR cessation has become a fact. It has to happen. And there is no look back. The time given after the consultation by the benchmark administration is only to ensure smooth transitioning. But there is no look back at the decision. So decision of cessation of LIBOR is final. I want you to appreciate one more aspect at this stage, that when the entire market knows, and we are also witnessing a very steep increase in the volume of transactions linked to SOFR or other benchmarks. Down the line, in fact, not very late, though you will have LIBOR publications, but they will slowly start losing relevance as regard to the real transactions or cash transactions taking place in the market. So friends, we really do not have enough time to prepare. So my request to all of the participants, which I know are treasurers, some people from treasury, some people, we have also had corporate representatives here, and we also have some management students here. So I think the time has come when we need to wake up and start understanding the implications of this event. I will say that for banks, like in normal course, when we meet in IBA work streams also, we talk about cessation. Generally, the focus of treasury people will be more on what they are handling, like in derivatives, as Mr. Kar also mentioned and Mr. Ashwani also mentioned. So they will be looking at those transactions because the volumes are also very high and they are very closely associated with those transactions. I know many of the bankers are also participating in the webinar. So to my mind, what becomes more important at this stage, in addition to appreciating the concept cessation and the risk involved, is a kind of preparedness for this transition. Now, not many banks have even signed ISDA document. The recent number is so low, surprisingly, hardly few banks have signed. So that is the state of awareness in the Indian market. In the interdisciplinary meeting of the group formed under Department of Economic Affairs of Government of India, they also raised this issue that we need to really spread awareness, and more needs to be done to spread awareness amongst not only corporates, but also amongst the banks. So my request will be to all the bankers who are present here, that they should immediately think of putting in place a system for governance. And it should be a metrics based. You must have a supervisory framework in place. It should not be single level. Like at operational level, you can have one group for governance. Then it should be reporting to some senior group, and the reporting must end at the board level. In fact, I will suggest there should be a regular agenda in the board meetings to review progress as regard to live versus session in the organization. So you need to have 2 or 3 layer structure depending on the size of the volumes you have or the business you are undertaking linked to live work or international business. Many of the banks who have got overseas presence, they would have raised money by MTNs, like medium-term notes programs. They are all linked to kind of LIBOR floating rate, or even if they are at fixed rate, they would have converted it to floating rate by entering into swaps. All those transactions, in addition to FCCBs and the ECBs, need to be looked at in addition to bilateral loans. So friends, having said that you need a strong governance system in place, which should be multiple layered, not single layer, then you need to mobilize resources for this event. Like you need to have people who have a bit of knowledge about the subject and seriousness, and then allocate areas. And at this stage, when you identify people and you allocate areas to them, my suggestion will be a lot needs to be done on preparation of material, information material. Like when our people are going to talk to corporates or when they are going to talk to management, internally also, not only at the board level, internally also in various groups. And when you are going to discuss with your corporate groups or your marketing groups, you will need to educate them. And for that, you need to prepare informative material that should be standard. And if it is centralized or if it is monitored from a particular group, that will be much better so that updation can be done as quickly as possible. So after mobilizing and allocating areas and having put in the governance framework in place, I will say that you need to work out on the repository of trades outstanding in your books. That repository means all kinds of trades you have got in your organization to be put in one place so that you have information about the benchmarks, you have information about the termination dates, and you also know the quantum at which needs to be addressed. So that repository will be very important. And after identifying the repository, now you need to have a look at the list of your counterparties. Those may be even banks, smaller banks, medium banks, large banks. And friends, don't mind, I will mention here that even amongst banks also the stage of maturity as regard to this particular event is different. Not that all the banks are so alive to the issue. So don't take it for granted that the counterparty is well prepared, so you can ignore. Please do initiate dialogues, talk to them, try to understand their awareness level, and if need be, extend help. Having done this, I will say that particularly those FCCBs, some customers have got still outstanding, or even banks have got MTNs, MNT, medium-term notes, MTNs, and we need to work on all those issues very seriously. That will form a part of your repository. So I will again just repeat, first of all, governance, then mobilization of areas, resources, and risk assessment. Having done that, the organization needs to appreciate the event in the sense that you need to have a preferred approach to the industry. Like you should accept that it is required and the organization is going to work in a particular direction and be ready for the new benchmarks. Here comes a very big risk as related to systems and procedures and your technology in place. When it comes to technology, you need to speak to the vendors. Now, the preparedness of vendor will again become an issue, like how prepared they are and their resources and the time, which they will have to, within which they will have to manage the technology risk will not be much. So they need to be engaged from now onwards. In fact, many of the organizations I've been interacting, they have already done that. But those who have not done that or still in the process, they should hurry up the process. Identify the vendors. Here again, economics is involved. You have to ask them the funding, and then you have to look for better opportunities and the resources they have got. You have to assess the risk involved in that, and you have to study the existing system, and you have to find out the areas which need to be addressed. Of course, certain information, as Mr. Kar said, is already available in the our information media. But still, we need to really have a look at it and try to understand at industry level, at your organization level, how they are getting related to your benchmarks, your portfolio. What is the impact? Like when the transaction takes place, are you in a position to quantify the kind of impact on the balance sheet of the bank or on the balance sheet of certain customers where you have a large risk, large exposure, and whether they are in a position to absorb that kind of change? Are they well equipped or not? At the same time, friends, I think the time has come when you have to start thinking of new products. As Mr. Ashwini said, we were using LIBOR since 1967. So many years have passed. We all are habitual, 69, sorry. So we all are habitual of just talking about LIBOR, and all of the products are, they are linked to LIBOR. Even the caps which Reserve Bank of India, the regulator, has put on trade finance and ECB, they are mostly linked to LIBOR. So the concept of new benchmark where there is very little amount of credit risk, where there is no forward-looking term rates as of now at least, and given the liquidity of these kinds of benchmarks, and down the line, how interbank market will evolve as regards to borrowing and lending, even that is a risk. All those things will need to be looked at when it comes to the risk management in the organizations. In fact, from IBA side also, we have been organizing webinars for education purpose, and it's open to all bankers, even for industry participants also we have done. That was from the risk management angle, friends. I will say that you need to create a infrastructure in the bank, especially looking at LIBOR cessation event, and that there should be regular meeting, like a predefined dates and agenda, so that the issues which are coming up are addressed at the appropriate time. And the reporting to the governance structure, that is the second layer or the highest level at the board, must take place. And you must keep on updating your information material, which you are going to share with your people who are talking to corporates or who are talking to even your own functionaries at branch level, those who are going to in turn talk to customers. That needs to be taken into consideration. Regular knowledge sharing is also a key which needs to be done during next few months. This time period is very crucial from this angle. So friends, organization needs to be standard. Please take up the issue at the appropriate level. Look at repository and go through from point number 1 to point number X, that you need to look at all the products, all possible products on the liability side and all possible products on the assets. So neither your liability side is warranting more attention or the asset side. Both are wanting similar attention. And look at the portfolio of FCNRBs. Generally the rates are linked to 1 year to 5 year swap rates in the market. So we take it for granted kind of thing that we will be having some kind of derivative market available for converting these fixed rate liabilities into floating rate, and then there will be demand from customers for trade finance or even for ECBs where we can give these loans. When the benchmarks changes, there will be some kind of I will say readjustment of things. So you cannot even ignore the liability side. So kindly have a look at your FCNRB portfolio also, in addition to FCCB and medium-term notes and ECBs. Friends, another issue which will come up is as regard to asset liability management. like the kind of parameters we have in place with the approval of the board, suddenly when you start engaging with new benchmarks, there will be some changes in the ratios, and they will attract a different kind of risk on the balance sheet. That needs to be addressed. Please don't ignore your ALM from interest sensitivity angle as well as from liquidity angle. Though down the line, forward-looking benchmarks, some benchmarks will evolve. Work is going on, but it may take some time. But we need to be prepared for this. So from my angle, this is the way the organizations, whether banks, smaller banks or larger banks, or even corporates who have got some big book, they must look at. In addition to what our friends have said in advance, the event of 2IK or then Brexit, thankfully or largely they were well managed. I will say that things were taken care of because of awareness and not much the detriment. But similarly, this event also needs to be addressed with a focus. So start with the system of governance, that is the infrastructure for governance in place. That should be the first thing to be done. And regular meetings, that will help you. Thank you to this forum for inviting me as a speaker. And I'm really happy to share my views with all of you. Thank you, Venki. Thank you once again, and over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhagat, for that lucid explanation, especially around the governance systems and the procedural nuances. We could really understand the operational side of labor transition. Thanks a lot. Our next speaker of the evening is Srimati Megha Ansari. She is the Associate Director of Financial Risk Management with KPMG, and an ex-banker with a demonstrated history of working in the risk management. She is skilled in IBOR transition, FRTB, HIMM, market risk, liquidity risk, Murex, Calypso, financial services, and team management. She will be sharing with us her thoughts on the impact of LIBOR transition on treasury and risk management. Over to Madam Megha.
Thank you, Venki. Good evening, everyone. So we've been in this webinar for an hour now. So a lot have been spoken already by Mr. Ashwini, Mr. Rudranarayan, and Mr. Gopal around, what is it when we talk from a LIBOR transition perspective, and what are the nuances, like from a base, what is it, where is it coming from, like why transition is happening, and what is it that is going to undergo a change. We know already that the underlying base for which these interest rate curves are being used are going to undergo a change, and it is just not for one currency, it is across all the currencies that this transition is happening, and across the globe the impact will be happening, and not just limited to a particular country or a particular region or a particular organizations. It's like a common man also, a common man who is not related to any of these financial institutions, he or she might think that LIBOR transition is something which is not for him or her to be concerned about, or he or she will not get impacted. But any financial transactions, like for that matter, a common man using a credit card may also get impacted, because the interest rate which is linked to the credit cards is also somewhere beyond linked to LIBOR. So it's something which is at a global level, from a common man to the people to senior management for organizations, everyone are being impacted. Now, if we talk from a product specific from a treasury as well as a risk management perspective, from a treasury perspective, we see that LIBOR transition affects all the processes, instruments that LIBOR is referencing to. Hence, each and every of these processes and instruments will have to be relooked from a LIBOR transition perspective. Institutions have a wide variety of financial contracts that are benchmarked to LIBOR, like bonds, loans, cash pooling arrangements. There are multi-currency credit facility agreements, derivatives. When we talk from a loan perspective, we have intercompany loan agreements. There are contracts where, as I was talking about credit card, there are small accounts like a regular bank account or regular accounts where just the late payment clauses are linked to IBOR. Like even if the base transaction is not linked to IBOR, there are late payment charges for different accounts which are linked to LIBOR. So these are already in existence. So there are two things. One is we have something already in place which needs to be undergone and changed, and something for something is from tomorrow, what we have to do. So what we have to do from tomorrow, so the new transactions might not be that big a challenge, but when we see from a past thing, so which has already been concluded. So the banks and the organizations, like not just the banks, the corporates, all the financial institutions which are somewhere, using LIBOR, or in some of the other financial transactions, they are using LIBOR, they'll have to relook as to what are the businesses where they are, linked to LIBOR, and what are the aspects, like each and every contract, they'll have to relook from a perspective that where is it that they are linked to LIBOR, and what part is getting impacted for LIBOR. From a treasury angle, if we think that what from a treasury angle, so treasurers will have to think that what is the best time that they need to start using the new ARR, because as we standing today, it's just we are already in May 2021. If we see technically, we have just 8 months in hand, where from 1st January 2022, we know that some of these LIBORs will extend for sure, that there's no ambiguity around it. So how these banks and organizations are thinking about implementation of the new products? What is the plan of transition from existing LIBOR to new interest rates? And when we talk from an implementation of the new alternative reference rates for these products, the internal and external treasury management systems which are there, which is the backbone of the entire functioning, like from front office to back office, mid office, and different reportings from a compliance perspective or from an accounting perspective. These systems are the backbone for the entire bank or the corporates which is been using them. So how these treasury systems which which are being used, how these when we look from this perspective, how are these going to get impacted, and what are the fundamental change which is required, and how with the new alternative reference rates these systems will be performing their day-to-day activities, what are the nuances around those. ISDA agreement is another important aspect which we are all aware that the derivatives are the basis for all derivatives. ISDA agreements are the basis, and those are required to be changed. But yeah, ISDA has already done a lot around it, and there is already a fallback clause. There is already a set process and mechanism which ISDA has published with the timelines and which is already on the go. But even if ISDA has come up to this level, when we discuss or when we have an interaction with different banks and different corporates across the globe, we see that even though ISDA has published everything, the banks are yet to adopt it. Now, when we say banks for ISDA agreements to be adopted by the bank, there are two specific parts when we talk from this angle. So one is adoption by the bank, and second is the counterparties or the stakeholders with which the banks or the corporates are interacting with. So because it is not something which unilaterally a bank can do. They will have to be in touch with their stakeholders. They will have to inform them and guide them with what are the changes happening, what are the aspects which will require to be relooked, and how these things will impact both the bank as well as the stakeholders. That communication is also an important aspect which is required to be done. Now, if we see from a treasurer's angle, from a system angle, we talked about from a contract angle, but another important aspect comes into picture is that there is additional cash balances which might be required to be kept for the treasurers. They'll have to plan around it, because with the interest rate movement, there can be a specific requirement where you see that due to the interest rate movement, the collaterals or the margins, if there are changes in the margin computations, and if those are undergoing to be changed, there might be a possibility that the requirements to post margin or to receive margin from the stakeholders will be arising. So these are some of the aspects when we talk from a treasury angle, is something which required to be relooked at. Now, if we talk from a risk management angle, so if we bifurcate the risk management when we talk from a LIBOR transition, it can be bifurcated into two parts. One is the financial risk, and second is the non-financial risk. So if we see from a financial risk part, valuation risk, market risk, counterparty credit risk, and liquidity risk forms predominantly the major factors from a financial risk angle, which is going to impact any of the institutions which are linked to LIBOR. And from a non-financial part, legal conduct and documentation risk, operations risk, IT risk, reputational risk, and model risk are few of the parameters which every institution will have to relook at. But specifically, if we talk from a valuation and market risk perspective, what specifics which required to be relooked? The valuation of the core for the valuation for financial instruments and derivatives is the LIBOR. Like it is used as a reference index for the financial products, both and not just for collateral, centrally, bilaterally cleared, collateral management. Across the kind of products are linked with LIBOR. And as we are all aware, like, there has been lots of discussion around the difference between the LIBOR and ARR. So alternative risk-free rates and LIBOR are not economically same. So had it been just, that the method is different, but the economical impact is not there from the transition, it would have been a simpler for organizations. But in the current scenario, we see that there is quite a basis between LIBOR and ARR, and it is not a constant basis which we see between different currencies. It varies based on the market situations. It varies based on the stress scenarios. Like we saw that in March 2020, with the upcoming of COVID, the spread between the SOFR as well as the USD LIBOR was quite huge. So it is something which is not in the hands of, or it is, it is a market-driven thing where we see that the spread between the LIBOR and alternative reference rate will vary. So one of the important parameter which is required to be taken into consideration is when we are shifting from LIBOR to alternative reference rates, the base valuation is undergoing a change. How the economic difference between these valuations are being handled. So organizations will have to factor in that there might be a possibility that they will have to come up with some compensation mechanism where, because of the transition or on the date of transition, whatever the change in MTM is there, that requires to be paid or that requires to be exchanged with the counterparties. And that information has to be shared or communicated to these stakeholders in advance. So they are well aware of that there can be a financial impact as well when they are talking from the shift from LIBOR to ARR. And so this is one from a financial aspect. But when we talk from valuation angle, there are other aspects also which institutions will have to keep in mind, like building a new set of curves using the RFR across currencies, which includes bootstrapping of interest rate curves. Now, today, when we say that bootstrapping of interest rate curves, it is the bootstrapping is the base for these interest rate curves built in for any of these valuation are the LIBOR for different currencies. Now, with the change of those underlying inputs for these curve construction, the curve construction will have to be relooked at. The methodology will have to be relooked at. What are the theory, like the valuation theory or the mathematical formulas or the construct when we talk from either of the curve construction or from a valuation perspective, those will have to be revisited to understand where it is getting impacted and what are the financial implications. Is it that, any of the scenario where the model will not function correctly? Will it not be throwing a right number? So that is something very important that every organization having a reference to LIBOR will have to look at it. And now valuation is one base. There are other valuation adjustments like CVA, we have DVA, we have FVA, MVA. All these valuation adjustments are based on the base valuation. Now it's like a vicious circle. Like we have LIBOR. LIBOR is the base for valuation. My LIBOR is undergoing a change. So everything which is dependent, so it is the base input, and then every other step which follows after the input of interest rate curve, which is the valuation, every other parameter will have to be relooked. Now, when we talk from a valuation adjustment, CVA, XVA, DVAs, everything will have to be relooked. Whether with new curve, what are the financial impact on these adjustments? Will the existing methodology for these adjustments follow correctly? Will there be a requirement to relook at the methodology? And apart from this, so valuation is one part. When we talk from a market risk perspective, there are different parameters which, on a daily basis, which banks and the organizations which are from a treasury field, they are monitoring it. Like VAR, value at risk, PV01, Greeks, stress testing, stressed VAR, the PNL and the back testing of these portfolios, limit monitoring. So see, all of these parameters which are kind of a representation of the risk which the bank is running for, or a corporate is running, or any organization for that matter is running on any particular date. And all these are linked to the LIBOR. Now, when we say that LIBOR is going to extinct, so base calculations or the base underlying for all of these parameters will undergo a change. So start from VAR, like if we talk from just for the VAR perspective, they are generally, if we see that there are 2 to 3 methodologies which is followed for VAR. and if we are following an historical methodology, the baseline is that, you know, you need to have a look back period, the market data for look back period for at least minimum for 250 working days. Now, standing today, when we see from a LIBOR transition perspective, from for example, from 1st Jan 2022, if we say that, you know, USD LIBOR will not be used and SOFR will be used. Now, okay, valuation for a forward going perspective, it should be fine that, okay, we have everything in place. But what about VAR? How do we compute VAR? For computation of VAR, we will need to ensure that, you know, the current system or the current treasury system has those market data set up built into them for last historical period for which the VAR is required to be computed. And that raises a question that, is it that all these alternative rates which are going to be used in place of LIBOR, were they available for those period of time? And if they were even available, were they liquid, were they marketable? Was there any transaction being done at those rates which is being available? And first thing is that, and second is the basis between these two existing rates as well as the alternative rates. Now, if we are using a new proposed rate and there is a basis between the two, we will have to factor in a new risk factor when we compute VAR. So the entire methodology when we compute for VAR, it will undergo a change. Today, if I am computing VAR for an interest rate scenario, that will have, now going forward, I might have to have two scenarios, one for interest rate scenario and second for the basis between the LIBOR as well as SOFR. So it is a very small point which, you know, when we talk from a VAR perspective, it looks like, okay, just an interest rate is undergoing a change. But when we look at the impact of the small parameters where these are inputted, where these are being used, so it creates a big impact. So when we talk from a stress VAR perspective, what are the stress scenarios which should be considered? If my current VAR is being computed basis the current last one 250 market data based on the new rates, and the stress VAR are generally based on the historical period. What were these alternative rates available for those stress period? Were there in existence for those? So these are some of the specific nuances, you know, when we talk from a market risk perspective, which requires to be relooked at. Apart from this, if we see from ICAP perspective or the SRE, ICAP is basically both forward-looking. It's a forward-looking internal framework for any institutions which have, you know, both normative as well as economic perspective. But if we consider from a normative and economic perspective, it includes that, you know, all material risks around these are required to be captured. So market risk resulting from changes in benchmark will require to be factored into it. So the entire capital planning which happens for the ICAP presentation, for the ICAP preparation for any of the organizations, any of the banks, they will have to relook and factor in the risk which is getting you know, originated due to the transition. The capital computation, if we talk from a perspective of capital computation, the capital is the basis based on the different sensitivities and the present values of the transactions. Now, these sensitivities are eventually again linked to the interest rate. So again, there is something where, you know, even the capital computation is getting impacted. If we talk from an IRB interest rate risk in banking book, the scenario generation or the RFR curves, the computation of EV, the economic value of equity, or the stress test scenarios for IRB, all these will have to be relooked, like all the aspects from the risk management perspective, wherever there is a computation which is being done for the bank, from be it regulatory perspective or for capital planning or for capital management, everything will have to be relooked from that perspective. If we talk from a counterparty credit risk or the liquidity risk, again the same perspective, that, you know, the models, the processes where the liquidity risk is being monitored, the cash flow planning has to be done, because due to the changes in interest rate, there can be changes in the cash flow. There will be impact on the liquidity for the organizations. So that planning the banks will have to do. So if we see from a financial aspect, every aspect which has some connection with the LIBOR will have to be relooked and planned in advance. And then if we see the non-financial aspect, the legal conduct and documentation risk, as we spoke, that the contracts will have undergo a change. ISDA has come up with new contracts which will require to be relooked at. Those might require to be renegotiated with having a fallback languages. So banks will have to, you know, ensure that these legal and documentation risks are well taken care of. From an operational or a IT risk, the existing systems will have to be relooked, the vendor systems or the in-house systems, and to ensure that the flow of data and the computations are all in place with respect to and the systems which are in place are capable to take care of the alternative rates. And again, from a model perspective, same rationale goes that when we talk from an operational or an IT perspective, that even all the models which is there for the bank currently, they'll have to relook for all the models. They'll have to do an analysis around around those models, the valuation and assessment around those models, whether those models are performing right in the situation of an alternative risk-free rates being used. So those will have to be relooked, and the requirement for model assessment and the validations will be increased thereafter, during as well as the post-transition phase. And last but not the least is the reputation risk. So as we saw, there are different stakeholders which are involved. It is not just one section of the organization which will get impacted, and not just within the organization, all the stakeholders from even the outside the organization will also be linked to this transition. So there is a huge risk from a reputation angle which the organizations will follow, that they will have an eye from across the globe, like different institutions, different regulators. So from a conduct, legal, IT, or the process disruption or the operational risk, they'll have to be ensured that there are sufficient controls and processes in place, so that there is no scope of anything which is not going in the right direction. So if we summarize that, it summarizes somewhere that the entire organization is going to be impacted, be it banks, be it corporates, be it small NBFCs, or howsoever big or small the organization might be. So keeping into picture these aspects which are getting impacted, if we have to plan from the transition perspective, then we are working with different organizations across the bank. So how the work stream should be identified? It's like there are two phase thing. One is from the impact assessment thing and perspective, and second is from the readiness assessment. So initial impact assessment is required to be done to understand across different aspects of the risk which we just spoke about, like strategic, customer outreach, contractual, operational, model. So what are the areas and how are these going to be impacted first? And second, if that is getting impacted, how are those impacts going to be taken care of? What are the remediations which are required to be done? What are the actions which is required to be done? And now just not these two. There are two other aspects which will require to be looked at. One is from the existing perspective. So existing transactions, existing products will have to be relooked. And then from the angle of new products also. So it's like a two parallel thing, with parallel run of the entire work stream will have to be done, where one phase is looking at the existing products and the one phase is working from the new products angle, because both will have to be taken care separately. New ones will not have any financial impact as on date, but the existing products, the existing changes in every of these computations will have a bigger impact from a financial aspect also, which eventually will flow through the balance sheet and P&L of the organizations. So it from end to end, like start from the front office dealers to the balance sheet and P&L finance team, every organization will have an impact. So it is I think so, standing today in May 2021, it is high time that it's something which organizations should start. If they have not already, they should start looking at it. They should start building up a plan around it, so that when time comes, like with 31st December 2021 is not that far, and the organizations are well prepared in advance that with transition, how it is being tackled, and how the entire nuances around the computations, the entire nuances around the systems are being taken care of by the organizations, and they are well prepared in advance. That was from my side. Over to you, Venki.
Thanks, Megha, for that wonderful presentation. You have given us about the how the treasury management and risk management is going to be impacted on this LIBOR transition, and it was really a wonderful presentation. Friends, after an educative session where we learned the intricacies of the LIBOR transition, it is time for us to plan the next steps of LIBOR transition in our respective organizations. Hope this webinar helps in the same. So we are concluding this session well within the time. Before 6 p.m. we'll be able to conclude this one. On behalf of SYFX Treasury Foundation, I, Uday Bhaskar Reddy, deem it as my privilege to deliver the vote of thanks the contemporary webinar on labor transition. SYFX Treasury Foundation, as a part of Knowledge Series, is conducting series of webinars on contemporary topics of great utility to the Treasury fraternity. This is possible because of the visionary mentor of the foundation, Sri B. Samamurthy. The foundation owes a lot to him. He was there, he there in each and every endeavor of this particular assignments which we are taking it. And the topic was deftly deliberated by the worthy panel of speakers. Now, on behalf of the foundation, I thank Sri Ashwini Sindhwani, Chief Executive CREDAI, for lucidly explaining the concepts and paving the way to discuss further on the subject. SYFX Treasury Foundation is deeply obliged for your kind gestures, sir. And we would like to take this opportunity to thank Sri Rudranarayan Kar, CEO, Financial Benchmark India Private Limited, for having explained the Indian perspective of the labor transition, particularly the MIBOR, how it is going to be transited to adjusted MIBOR or modified MIBOR. This is the nicely taken, sir. And we, SYFX Treasury Foundation, thank you for this particular delivery of this lecture, sir. We had the privilege of hearing Sri Gopal Murali Bhagat, Deputy Chief Executive IBA, and on behalf of, he was talking about the operationalization of the labor transition and what is expected to be done before the labor transition. It is a really great delivery, sir. And we, on behalf of the SYFX Treasury Foundation, I profusely thank you for the wonderful deliberation of the subject. And on behalf of the SYFX Treasury Foundation, I thank SMT Megha Ranasaria for her detailed presentation on the best practices in the labor transition process. And also she has deftly dealt on how the treasury and risk management is likely to be impacted, what is the way forward. This is well taken. And I also thank Puneet, Mr. Puneet and Mr. Salil from KPMG for their helpful efforts in the preparation of the content of the topic. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor for this event, National Stock Exchange of India Limited, for their continued support in our every initiative. Special mention of thanks to Mr. Vivek for the excellent technical support in conducting this webinar. And he was there working hard for how to materialize the technically how we'll be able to make this webinar. Finally, on behalf of SYFX Treasury Foundation, I thank all of you for having encouraged us with your valuable presence. The participants, it is overwhelming. It is crossed 230 to 40, I believe. And finally, unfortunately, we could not have a question and answer session in this particular distance. Should you have any query or feedback, please send the same to us on our email at contact@syfx.org. This I'll be able to give you share this particular thing. 1 second. I think I'm not able to share. It's okay. This is a contact contact@syfx.org. We will come back with the possible explanation at the earliest. With this, Treasury Foundation takes leave from all of you with a promise to come back to you soon with a relevant webinar. Thanks and namaste.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks all. Thanks everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks.